As arcade rhythm games have aged and progressed, over time two dominant forces in Japanese arcade rhythm games would take hold. One is Konami with its long-running Bemani series, starting all the way back in 1997 with Beatmania, the DJ simulation game, up to Konami's newest rhythm game, Dance Around, with its motion tracking gameplay. Konami is a long-standing kingpin in Japanese rhythm games and has surely helped the continued popularity of rhythm games in Japan. The other is Sega. Being a slightly newer player in the Japanese rhythm game market, but being no stranger to the arcade scene, Sega puts its focus on its trio of rhythm games, Ongeki, Chunodem, and Mai, collectively known as Geki Chumai. Despite being less established in the beginning compared to Konami, Sega has shown an ability to make a long-lasting rhythm game, with Chunodem even taking some serious wind out of Bemani games when it started to gain popularity. Games by these two companies tend to do decently well as they're released, and both Konami and Sega have still shown interest in developing new games and versions in recent years. Today, however, we're here to talk about a game made by neither of these companies. A little rhythm game from an arcade developer that had never stepped foot in the rhythm game space, with a cabinet pretty unique relative to the rest of the market at the time, and backed by a music collective whose artists are most known for making music for rhythm games. You all knew this one was coming. Today we're here to talk about WACCA. Before we get started, if you like this video or any of my other content, consider checking out my Patreon. Some of the benefits include early access to the audio version of my videos, your name in the credits, monthly video updates, and more. With that said, let's get on with the video. WACCA is a Japanese arcade rhythm game developed and published by Marvelous. Marvelous is a very established developer and publisher, having been in both the Japanese and US market for many years. If I had to pick out some more recent games that people in the US might know, they developed God Eater 3 and Daemon X Machina. They also developed the Wii version of Itadaki Street, known in the US as Fortune Street. That said, WACCA wasn't their first foray into Japanese arcades either. Marvelous has developed some Japanese arcade games targeted at kids, namely Dragon Quest Scan Battlers, as well as basically all of the Pokemon arcade games for kids. However, Marvelous had never developed a rhythm game before, and when asked about why they had decided on making a rhythm game with the location test, the game's producer, Tatsuya Yokoyama, simply stated that he was a fan of rhythm games. More specifically, he felt that Marvelous had already established that they were well versed in making games for kids, and that they wanted to try a new challenge. The music for the game would be provided by Hardcore Tano C. Hardcore Tano C is Japan's biggest hardcore electronic music label, and Tano C artists are no strangers to contributing to rhythm games, as many of them have done so before. This time they were getting even more involved than usual, having some of the artists contributing songs to the game create the charts for their songs as well, which was a new challenge for some of the artists. Having a big name in Japanese rhythm games like Hardcore Tano C would probably have instilled some confidence in the project from a player perspective, as rhythm game players were almost certainly familiar with some of their work already. Some of Tano C's members were working with the development team as early as the prototyping stage, and the producer claims that they went through something like 20 cabinet prototypes before deciding on the final product. After the location tests were complete, cabinets were rolled out to arcades, and WACCA's online service began with the first version on July 18, 2019. WACCA's gameplay takes place on a 360-degree playfield mapped around the circular control interface. The game is mainly played by tapping, swiping, and holding notes all around the circle. There are parts of gameplay where the track will restrict itself to only certain areas of the controller, or there will be no restriction where the entire circle is fair game. There are the usual standard notes, which are purple and are linked together if there are multiple on the same timing. In addition, there are yellow notes that are often placed in large chains and do not require timing to be hit, just that there is a hand placed on the appropriate region when it arrives at the judgment point. There are also hold notes, which just require they be touched anywhere, and due to the size of the holds, can be safely passed from hand to hand if necessary. Finally, there are two directions of swipe notes. Those that go along the sides of the circle, requiring the player to swipe left and right, and those that go forward and back, requiring the player to either swipe towards the screen or away. The producer stated that the main reasoning for the 360-degree touch panel was to create an experience that couldn't be done at home, and also that was different from gameplay on mobile devices at that time. Topazolite expressed that he thought the gameplay was similar enough to existing games that you could have some crossover skill, but not a lot. In that way, he felt that even high-level players of other rhythm games, sometimes referred to as rankers, could enjoy and be challenged by WACCA's gameplay. WACCA had some minor changes and feature additions as it progressed through its different versions. So let's take a look at the different versions in WACCA and what was added in each. Released on January 23rd, 2020, was WACCA's second version, WACCA S. WACCA S mostly contained quality of life features and updates to flesh out the experience of WACCA. Stage Up mode was added, taking on a similar form to Dan courses from 2DX. Stage Up contained 14 courses of 3 songs, each increasing in difficulty and with different clear requirements. BPM display on Song Select was added, being able to return to Song Select after picking a difficulty was added, headphone volume adjustments were made, and some songs were re-rated in WACCA S. They also added a system known as Gate that was used for acquiring unlocks simply by playing the game. Other than the new songs and content that came with this version, those were the main additions, being a decent effort to flesh the game's quality out a bit relatively quickly after release. Also, yeah, you know the date I said that this version launched? Please look at it again and remember what else happened this year. Okay, moving on. On September 7th, 2020, WACCA Lily was released. This was more of a full sequel version than S, getting a lot more features and improvements, and also a new mascot character of the same name, Lily, who became something of a fan-favorite rhythm game character at the time. A lot of the features added in Lily were popular features present in other currently popular rhythm games. A rating system was added, with players accumulating a profile rating with higher difficulty songs and higher scores being worth more rating, with players being separated into rating brackets at certain thresholds. This is a popular system in games like Chew to the Med Soundbowl Text, so it was an understandable addition. They added more quality of life stuff for their users as well, such as the ability to immediately continue to the next credit upon ending your set without having to scan your pass again, and the ability to accept IC payment cards like Suica right at the machine, making paying for plays easier than carrying around a pocket full of 100 yen coins. The game also just had some general UI improvements made as well, making navigating to the songs a bit more intuitive. Overall, this was a big update for the playability of the game, and also added replayability in the form of the rating system, obviously in addition to more songs as well. Lily R released on March 11th, 2021, and was the half-version update for Lily. As such, the features it added were a bit smaller in scale, but still had good feature additions like adding support for rivals, adding recommended song selections and settings for beginner players, making expert unlocks slightly easier, only requiring an S or higher, more song selection UI updates, and adding a feature for unlocking more cosmetics for your user profile. I think something to point out here is that up to this point, Marvelous had been very consistent with updating WACCA. Version updates roughly every 6 months and a lot of quality of life features added in each one. However, just about 2 years into its life, we're already on WACCA's final version. Released on August 10th, 2021 was WACCA Reverse, WACCA's final version, though we didn't know it at the time. Like Lily, Reverse was a major version update that came with a few big game updates. It also came with a new mascot character as well, this time around being Rune. All the characters for WACCA over its lifetime were drawn by Lamb, and they are all pretty popular with the rhythm game community. I think they did a great job with their designs. Aside from the new songs added to Reverse, including an Archaea crossover, some new modes were added. A bingo unlock system was added wherein clearing missions helps you fill out a mini bingo board where you can also get rewards for making lines. They also added a free time mode, which is similar to premium start modes in Bimani games that allow you to play as many songs as possible within the time limit, rather than restricting you to a set number of songs. Some modifications to the co-op mode were made, the music select screen was updated again, and the options menu was updated to allow players to include more information on screen during play. The results screen was updated to show more data, and more cosmetics for Reverse were added to the game for profile customization. I'd imagine if you were a WACCA player around this time, the consistency of updates probably had you feeling pretty good about the game continuing for a bit. 2 major updates in 2 years is a very consistent pace for releases, so I'm sure WACCA's players were expecting Reverse's half version to hit about 6 months later. However, 6 months would come and go with no half version, and on June 21st, 2022, WACCA players would be met with some bad news. On June 21st, 2022, it was announced that WACCA's online service would be ending on August 31st, 2022, just over 3 years after starting its operation. A last spurt event was run leading up to the 31st of August, at which point the game would be patched to run offline. It would no longer be possible to save scores, but all modes could still be played with all songs and difficulties available for all stages. With that, WACCA was done. The little rhythm game taking on the big publishers was gone, relegated to offline patched cabinets. So, why did WACCA die? Well, we've got a few factors. First off, on release, the game didn't exactly have a huge immediate audience. It was a unique concept and was made by a company with no track record in rhythm games, so it didn't have a lot of immediate carryover players like Konami or Sega would with a new game, especially since the gameplay wasn't really like anything else at the time. This meant that the game would need some time to get up to speed and develop an audience. That said, I think it was apparent that Marvelous was dedicated to keeping the game up to date and making it into a long-lasting rhythm game. Quality features were coming into the game at a good pace, and I think even by Lily, the game had a really solid set of features rivaling most other rhythm games at the time. The game also showed a bit of popularity in the US over its life, being present at US Round 1 locations, though perhaps a little neutered from its potential due to the total lack of English in the interface. Which brings us to the elephant in the room. Less than a year after WACCA launched, the COVID-19 pandemic hit, grinding most of entertainment to a halt the world over. The game really hadn't had much time to secure that base audience that it needed, and people were going to the arcades less than usual or not at all during most of 2020. This was also highlighted by an overall larger problem, that being the general decline of Japanese arcades over the past couple of years, spotlighted by the pandemic. Aside from the downward trend of arcades over time in Japan in the last few years, though slow, the pandemic saw the closing of many iconic and large arcades in Japan, including Sega's Building 2 arcade in Akihabara, with the iconic externally visible escalators. COVID certainly contributed to WACCA seeing less traffic as arcades potentially bringing players to the game closed down, cutting off essential avenues for WACCA to gain players. Many arcades were entirely shut down for periods of time as well, even if they didn't permanently close, leaving games sitting on arcade floors not collecting revenue for long periods of time. While since then arcades have entered a slight recovery trend in Japan, it's very likely that COVID and the issues Japanese arcades face stunted the growth of WACCA early, leaving the game to have a rough start financially. While they did make it out of the main body of the pandemic, the game didn't really have time to finally thrive in restored arcades before being taken offline. WACCA hasn't exactly disappeared from the spotlight just yet. As stated, the game got an offline patch, but WACCA songs are also continuing to pop up as collaboration events in other rhythm games like Archaea, Roteno, and Chunithm. They seem willing to put their songs in any games that will take them these days, letting fans of WACCA at least play other games and still be able to enjoy some of WACCA's exclusive songs. I imagine we'll keep seeing these for a while since they've still been happening even recently. So WACCA lives on in its offline patch and its collaboration events. I think WACCA is a rhythm game with a lot of heart behind it that just had horrendously unlucky timing with when it hit the market. The pandemic and arcade situation in Japan almost certainly stunted its growth and led it to a shortened lifespan on the market, despite adding many great features to the game over time. I'd like to quickly add my perspective as a US rhythm game player for a minute. I think myself and a lot of people have an impression that WACCA was for some reason more popular here in America than in Japan. Many NA players I know of speak fondly of WACCA, and there's a prevailing consensus that the game had the potential for a larger fanbase here, especially if the game had supported English or had been available outside of Round 1 locations. I found that NA WACCA players were just generally quite passionate about the game, and it's very sad to see a game so loved by an audience that Japanese rhythm games generally don't cater to, going unnoticed while their favorite rhythm game dies in just a 3-year span. The production team seemed to really believe in the game as well, so before we end the episode I'd like to take a second and read a translation of the final note that the producer left on the day that WACCA went offline. To everyone involved in WACCA, this is Yokoyama, the producer. As previously announced, WACCA will be discontinuing its online service at the end of today. Thank you for your 3 years of service. It seemed like a long time, though I didn't realize it, but over the past 3 years, I've always thought about how I could make the game more enjoyable. Every day was filled with joy and sorrow, and I was determined to work harder. WACCA is our company's first arcade rhythm game title, and we started from a groping state full of unknowns. Of course, there is no end to the troubles and accidents. Without everyone's support and encouragement, I don't think I would have been able to overcome them and continue to this point. In particular, I'm happy to see people interacting at real events, having fun playing, and talking to each other. If the social situation was better, I really wanted to hold more real events. The various experiences and emotions I gained from WACCA have become a great asset for myself and the team. Unfortunately, we have decided to end the service this time, but if WACCA has become an emotional asset in your life, nothing would make me happier. Once again, thank you very much to all of you who have been involved in WACCA. The offline version will start tomorrow. Also, although it has already been announced, there are also goods and collaborations, so please continue to support WACCA for many years to come. See you again someday! Producer Tatsuya Yokoyama. Thanks for watching, and thanks so much to my supporters on Patreon. Check out my Twitter, Twitch, and my community Discord. Links are in the description below. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.